Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another week of Line Change, the NHL betting podcast from the Action Network. My name is Michael Leboff, and joining me for this, our Tuesday, October 15th preview episode is Nick Martin. And Nick will start this episode with our favorite underdogs. We got a nice 9-game slate, so we can kick it off with a couple pooches to get things going. And full disclosure, if I knew you were going to go to this team, but if you didn't, I was also going to endorse them. It's the same team that we endorsed our last episode. That's the Columbus Blue Jackets. They fell short then, but then they did pull a pretty big upset a couple nights ago against the Colorado Avalanche. They're plus 145 at home against the Florida Panthers. The Panthers minus 175. Another note, we are recording this right before the third period of Florida and Boston. It's around 3 p.m. Eastern time here on Monday afternoon. So why do you like the Blue Jackets here?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good spot to go on a Blue Jackets team that I think is going to be potentially one of these ones that's a little sneaky out of the gates. We talked about it last week. Hasn't exactly paid off for me, but I think there's been a lot of good examples where you don't know exactly which teams are going to come out playing a fairly organized and structured game and looking connected and like they're ready to go this season. And I think that through 2 games, the Blue Jackets have looked quite respectable. Obviously, that's easy to make based off that Colorado upset, which was a little gifted to them with the Avalanche's goaltending. But I also thought they could have had a better result a lot of the time in Minnesota the night before. So I have been fairly impressed with what the Blue Jackets have done so far, and they're catching the Panthers in a really good spot here. So I think at +1, anything better than +140, we're getting a good number. The Panthers will not have Barkov here. Sounds like they may still not have Tkachuk. As you noted, they're playing right now, so it is a back-to-back spot. I thought Spencer Knight looked respectable versus Buffalo, even though he ended up getting hung with a really bad stat line. But it will likely be him in goal. So I just think when you look at the Blue Jackets coming for their home opener, you catch a team that I think could be a little lackadaisical and missing obviously some huge pieces here. This is a pretty good number to take a chance with the Jackets. I think they can own their share of the play here. They don't have the goaltending mismatch they would on a normal night versus Florida when they would have Bobrovsky in. So yeah, I think all in all, it just sets up as a good chance to take a shot with the Blue Jackets.
Yeah, it does sound like Tkachuk will be out for a little bit with this illness. They were floating around at October 22nd date, so maybe it's like a flu or I don't know. And that also means could run through the room a little bit. But like you said, Barkov, Tkachuk out. Good rest spot for the Blue Jackets coming back after their big win against the Avalanche. So I'm with you here. I like Columbus at the current numbers. Plus 145 out there right now, plus 150. But I think if you can get plus 140 or better on Columbus, it's worth a bet. For my favorite underdog, you're going to be in the building for this one. We can break it down. The Flames are hosting the Chicago Blackhawks at the Saddle Dome. Chicago's plus 140. The Flames are minus 166. Calgary is one of the surprise outfits to start the season. It's only 3 games, but and they certainly caught the rub of the luck against the Oilers on Sunday night in the Battle of Alberta. But putting that aside, like they've just been impressive. They're sporting a +7 goal difference. Dustin Wolf has been really good for them. It's not like they're just running through, the Sharks and bottom feeders either. It's been an impressive run for Calgary. Chicago's 1-1-1 record doesn't look as nifty as Calgary's 3-0-0, but you and I both agree that the Chicago team has played pretty well despite dropping 2 of 3. And I think that they are just not as far. There's just not as much of a gap between these two teams as these odds imply. I wonder if Calgary maybe goes 1-2 or 1-1-1 out of the gates. What's the difference here? I give full credit to the Flames for the way they played, but I do think the Blackhawks deserve a little bit more than this number. So I like plus 140 or better on Chicago as my favorite underdog with you in the building.
Yeah, both these teams for sure can go into that grouping of teams that came out ready to play and have been playing really well as a team because like Chicago's had 3 pretty tough spots. They got Utah in the inaugural game in Utah, and everyone's been seeing how Utah's come out and played so far. And I thought Chicago did quite well to keep that game close and really make Utah earn it. And then in Winnipeg with Soderblom in goal, I think a lot of people got burned on some various Jets plays. but they did a pretty good job of hanging around in that one before eventually blowing it late. And, I think you'd obviously have to feel good about their last performance in Edmonton too, where Bedard was really good. So I'm actually really excited to see this battle between two likely non-playoff teams, but I thought the numbers looked about fair.
Okay. So it's Blue Jackets for you, Blackhawks for me. To start the show, let's go to Canucks and Lightning up next. Vancouver plus 110 on the road. Tampa minus 130. The total here is 6.5. I don't have too much here. The Lightning aren't the only team in this boat on this slate. I think I'd rather bet Tampa at the number, but they've only played one game, and I do think that kind of matters here, that their schedule has been a little just off because of the hurricane. And Vancouver, it's been tight for them, man. They've now blown a couple games where they should have taken care of business, 2 overtime losses, and now they travel across the country. I don't think that's an ideal situation. I think these two teams, you can give a slight edge to Vancouver just in a vacuum on depth, but I don't trust them here. I would much rather bet Tampa as like a short favorite, but I think the number looks just kind of uninteresting.
Yeah, I'm right with you. I'm pretty low on the Canucks, and so far that's been one of the things that's been paying off, but I not really overly interested in this number here. And I mean, Tampa did look really quite good versus Carolina. I'm a little concerned that they might be better than I thought, but this kind of a number with the way it's going for the Canucks, I just want to pass.
The same price for Vegas and Washington, with the away team being the favorite here. That's Vegas. They're minus 130, Caps plus 110, total 6. I lean same thing. I lean towards Vegas. Tough travel situation, and I do wonder. We've seen some really good hockey out of the Knights start the season. You and I were both talking about in the build up to the year that maybe Vegas is being overlooked a little bit, like not being included in that elite tier with the Oilers and Panthers and other top teams. Looks like they played their way into that group already. And I think this is a fine matchup for them. I don't think either one of us are expecting the Capitals to score the lights out or just like run and gun with many teams. Looks like Matt Roy will be missing this one as well. He's a new player, but a pretty key cog on that blue line. I would lean towards Vegas here. But I just think I have enough other bets that I like, so I'll likely pass at this price.
I do, yeah, I'm right with you. I'm going to pass. I'm just trying to pull up, but I think there are what I would consider bettable numbers to get off the train of just saying pass on everything on Vegas to win the division. There's plus 225s out there, so I would play that. I think that coming into the year, we already were pretty high on the idea that Vegas was the second best team in the division. I think the Kings could sneak in there and be the third best team in the division. Honestly, I continue to be quite low on the Canucks, but I think there's value with the Kings at that, or with the Knights at that number. I wouldn't hate taking a shot on them. It feels like they kind of got written off after that first round last year and playing down the stretch without so many key pieces. And I feel like everyone kind of forgot who this team is and what they are, with Hurdle and Hanifin in the mix as well. So I'm pretty high on the Knights. I'm definitely not overly interested in fading them at this kind of a number right now when they're looking like one of the best teams in the league. So yeah, I think they can definitely win the division often enough to make that a profitable number. And not to just get too, I feel like we always see these things early on in the season where teams play 3 games. It's all you know about that team, and then I think it almost gets weighted more than 3 games ever would later in the season. But with Vegas, this is a team that I think has a roster that you can almost feel a little safer overreacting and playing them to win the division at this kind of a number.
I would agree with you about that. I even coming into the year, it just felt, I think that's part of the reason why they were overlooked, is like people were like, we already kind of know what this team is. Like they're going to probably be around 100 points, and didn't get enough. That for some reason doesn't seem as exciting as like, oh, the Canucks, I added Jake DeBrusk, and they're coming off a surprise season, and the Oilers are doing this. And so they just get less in the shuffle over a long summer. So I like your thought there. Let's talk about the Kraken and the Predators next. I like Seattle here at plus 150. The Preds are minus 180 at home, total 6. It's not been very good for Nashville out of the gates. I think we had seen this one coming a little bit with the Preds. They're 0-2, only scored 3 goals, -4 goal difference. The Kraken, I feel like you can categorize them as a mixed bag, but I do think that through their first 3 games, they're 1-2, -2 goal difference. And you could tell me that you think the Kraken deserve to be any combination of like wins, losses, and overtime losses through 3 games, and I think you can make a pretty good argument for that, because you could say they should have won that Blues game and they didn't win it, and they could have lost. What was it, the Wild game that they ended up winning with was that the Everly game, but it's and then I guess the Dallas game is a little tough, but I didn't think that even in a shutout they were that bad. I guess a good Stars team maybe, but my point is I do think that this team has some teeth to it, and the Predators are a team I just don't want to bet. In fact, I want to bet against them when they're at this kind of price coming out of the gate. So I like Seattle here at plus 150. The goaltending is scary, but it's always what it's going to be with this team.
Yeah, the thing about the Kraken, I think that's already showing is that they're going to be an annoying team to bet on. You're always going to feel like they played pretty good, but they just don't have guys, the offensive talent, stealing games and like paying off chances at a high rate. So I'm kind of with you. Like I look at their depth chart and the way they've been playing, and it feels like a good or a good time to take a chance. But I'm just like already ready to bet on them and have nights like that Blues game where I want to bitch about losing, and then it's just that might just be what it is when you've got kind of mediocre goaltending and not that many guys finishing at a high rate. And you don't have offensive stars like some of these other teams.
Yeah, and Vince Dunn missed the last game. I think that a couple guys who I don't mind backing to score are Bjorkstrand and Montour. Both of them are getting shots and just not finding the back of the net. So those 2 guys in that. We'll talk some anytime goal scorers as well. Speaking of those Stars that shut out the Kraken, that was back-to-back shutouts for the Stars. I think that the Dallas shutout against the Islanders was a little dubious too, but I don't think it's about like the Islanders played better than Dallas. I just think that there were a couple chances that went asking that the Islanders could have scored. I think that game was closer to a coin flip than a lot of Islander fans would admit. Didn't think the Islanders started particularly well. They made too many mistakes and paid for them. Dallas is good enough to know that those chances can't be left asking, where the Islanders aren't at that level yet. And Dallas kind of like just sleptwalked through the rest of that game and were able to keep the Islanders off the board. I give them a lot of credit for the way that they kind of bent but didn't break. So now they host the Sharks. They're undefeated. Dallas is it, and they're minus 360, biggest favorite on the board. Sharks plus 285, total 6. The reason I brought that up is I don't think that Dallas has been like a world-beating team. I think Vegas, like their 3-0 start, has been really, really impressive, and full credit to them for doing it. Dallas, you get, they don't ask you how, but they ask you how many, and so all credit to them. But I wouldn't say that this is like a team that looks like a wagon out of the gates, and they're very likely to start 4-0. So perhaps it's another chance. Their next game is when you want to go against them and not with the Sharks. But I do think that trying to beat them when they're this big a favorite is a little tempting.
I'm with you. I would lean towards some sort of Sharks, maybe holding them to below 3.5 goals or something like that at a decent number if I had to play this game. But I didn't. I don't know. It does feel like a huge line early in the season, but this was kind of just one of these ones I glanced over and wasn't overly interested in.
Yeah, Macklin Celebrini out for the Sharks. The goaltending, who knows? And
yeah, on that note, I do think to continue going down, I think this is going to be a really popular thought today, but I was a little surprised that there wasn't more movement based off the opening week on Lane Hudson to win the Calder. His number hasn't budged much since where it was at the start of the season. He was clearly the best rookie last week, and you've got Celebrini injured. I thought Michkov looked pretty good. I'm not too worried about him, but it still feels like what Hudson has done so far with Celebrini missing time, I would have actually expected more of a move in the market. So I definitely wouldn't talk anyone off of jumping on that right now.
Yeah, and I was wondering if we were going to start hearing people talk up Dustin Wolf a little bit in that market too, just based off what was it, the small sample. But we were kind of skeptical about how he's coming in, and it does feel like that race just it looked very straightforward for a while, that it was going to be, the Cutter, Gauthier, and Michkov and Celebrini, Will Smith, like the top at the top looked like it was established with Lane Hudson being like stalking the pace, and now I would argue that after 1 week, it's been 1 week, so we can, I guess, slower roll a little bit, but he should probably be um, the favorite in
He's
the
leading a
market, just
lot of
because.
categories. Like he's
Yeah,
really driving plays, got the most offensive zone time of any player in the league with possession. It looks really good. I think, like I've talked about on this show, he's a lot better than Mike Matheson. I feel like it's already clear that if you put him on the top power play, he'd do a better job running it. So um, in time, he might take over that role, and then it's just going to be kind of even more clear that he's got a really good shot at this. So, and Cutter kind of let us down. He looked pretty
yeah.
mid, the whole Ducks offense. So it's not like he's come out of the gates and helped his case at all. So yeah, I feel like Hudson right now looks like probably he's going to end up with a better chance than the current numbers.
Yep, yeah. It's Lane Hudson, Logan Stankoven, and Seamus Casey have been the three um, rookies that aren't injured that have, I think, kind of set the race alight a little bit. All right, before we get to our anytime goal scores and then our best bets, we'll talk Flyers and Oilers. The Flyers plus 185 in Edmonton. The Oilers minus 225, and the total here 6.5. I'll put it this way. I while fully acknowledging that the Flyers are in a completely different class when it comes to just pure roster talent compared to the Oilers, with Edmonton being leaps and bounds better than them and more talented. I will say that I can't think of another team in the NHL who I'd want to play less than Philadelphia when you're Edmonton in this particular situation. You're 0-3. You started the season 2-9-1 last year, got your coach fired, thanks to that start. And the pressure's piling up. The schedule that you played hasn't been particularly hard. It's been the Oilers, the Jets, and then the Flames, the Jets, and the Blackhawks. You'd expect Edmonton. I mean, they were big favorites in all three games. They get shut up by the Jets. They've scored 3 goals. They've had bad luck and some reviews that came back against them. I fully get all that, but you're also a huge favorite. Like that stuff, you should be good enough that stuff doesn't ruin your 3-game stretch. And now you're taking on a Flyers team that, yeah, you're much better than them, but they will absolutely make you work for every inch of ice, and they're there to frustrate you. And when you're a little desperate, and perhaps you're gripping your stick a little tight, like what kind of team do you not want to play? I would argue that, like, you don't want to play a team that's just going to grind you down and hang around and try to outwork you, and let that desperation turn into frustration. So I think the Flyers are really interesting at this price. And I also think that this number could grow on Philadelphia, considering most people, I would imagine, will bet into the fact that, man, I can't see Edmonton falling to 0-4 to start the season and getting off to one of these rough starts. So I think I'm going to bet the Flyers to close out my Tuesday night's NHL slate.
Yeah, my Oilers can't lose this spot matchup was the Hawks game. I thought that the Oilers were, I thought it was actually a pretty good shot to take on them, kind of blowing them out of the water. And they just clearly looked horrible and disconnected, enough so that I was able to at least think it was worthy of betting them to lose the Battle of Alberta, because that was a really long number. And looking at this game, like, what is the case of betting the Oilers at minus 215? It feels like you're going really far down the well of, like, they can't lose. This is a team that went to game 7 of the Cup finals, all of that stuff, when they've looked pretty flawed and they know it. They've been not managing the puck well. Some of the, like, Emerson hasn't been good. The goaltending looks shaky. The offense hasn't popped the way anyone has expected, which I don't think anyone's worried that is going to be a long-term problem. But I think the defense core and the goaltending could easily be mid, like quite mid in this league. So it feels like the Oilers are still pretty overvalued. They're still scuffling. And like we saw last year, they can lose a lot more of these kind of have to get right spot matchups. I think they had one versus Philly last year, right around this time that they lost. And I feel like it was a similar kind of thing where everyone was just like thinking they're going to find it and figure it out. And I think it's definitely better at this kind of a number to just keep waiting and either take a shot with the Flyers or at least just don't bet into that idea, because I feel like there's always going to be better spots down the, later on down the line to see what Edmonton is and get on them when things actually look right.
All right, and that brings us to our favorite anytime goal scorers for Tuesday night. If you have any, actually both of ours land in the same game here, in a game we haven't touched on. We'll save it for the end of the show. But I like Dougie Hamilton for the Devils, who they are playing right now. He hasn't scored yet, but they're up 3-0 on Utah in this matinee on Columbus Day or Canadian Thanksgiving. Dougie's getting plenty of shots off, and I think he's looked really good. The Devils have looked good, so I just think you can get dealt a pretty big number on Dougie. So barring Seamus Casey just taking over every role on that Devils blue line, I think that Dougie remains a pretty good value here. What about you?
I am going to go with, shout out to Seamus Casey. He scored for us this morning, and he looks unreal. He's just so good at getting shots through. So that's definitely, he could be a big get for the Devils, especially if they keep having to beat up back end. I'm going to go with Andrei Svechnikov. I thought he was unreal and probably the only high point for Carolina on opening night. His play really stood out. He's a guy that we talked about. He had 19 goals last year, and I think he is going to be one of the reasons that Carolina doesn't drop off that badly this season. He needs to have a huge year, and he could have scored a couple of really nice goals on opening night versus Tampa. Vasi made a really big save on the one, and overall I thought his game was excellent. He had 0.71 expected goals, which seemed about fair, if not a touch low to me, and he was plus 260 to score in that game. I am expecting that to come down a little bit. We don't have the prices yet, but I'm thinking we should probably still see more than plus 200 or right about that. So I like Svechnikov to get things moving on what will hopefully be a big season for him.
Okay, let's wrap this up with our favorite bets for Tuesday, October the 15th. We'll go with yours first. Your bet comes in on Minnesota and St. Louis. Minnesota minus 120, road favorite. Blues even money, and the total is 6. What do you got?
Yeah, this one was also probably predictable to you, but I like the Minnesota Wild to win this game. I think that they deserve to be a bigger favorite. The Wild are always a bit of an analytical darling, but through 3 games, they're at 53% expected goal share. I've thought they looked pretty solid in all of them. I think that their back end is just a significant advantage over the Blues. I think they got a couple of defenders to be the best guy on that Blues team. Kaprizov and Boldy both look really good. So I think that all in all, we're going to see the Wild end up being the better of these two teams as the year moves on. I feel pretty happy taking them on at anything better than minus 125 in this spot, and just exposing a Blues team that I think really, they, like, the Blues always do this, so you kind of got to give it to them. They led the league in 5-on-5 shooting percentage last season. I think they're always up there among teams that outscore expectations, but the defensive flaws looked pretty clear. I think you look at that road trip, even what they got out of it, obviously they kind of pushed to come back in the Sharks game, but winning that Kraken game was pretty crazy. They looked really flawed at 5-on-5. And then they hung around in the Vegas game, but all same thing, 5-on-5. It was pretty clear which team was the better side. So I think we'll see. It might not be a ton of fun, but I feel pretty confident that the Wild will own a lot more of the play here, and that we're getting a solid number for a team that I think is going to finish a fair bit above them in the standings.
All right, my best bet comes in on the Devils at plus 124. I like it down to plus 120. They're taking on Carolina, the Hurricanes at home. Carolina's minus 148, total 6. Devils just continue to be pretty impressive. As you noted, like, the blue line is banged up with Brett Pesce has yet to make his debut. Luke Hughes has been out all season. So they're a little makeshift on the blue line, but everything is kind of just checked out pretty well with New Jersey. And this should be a Markstrom start, although with the way that Jake Allen has played this season, I don't know if there's like a huge discrepancy between the two goalies, just like at the current moment. And the other thing that I like about this game is that the Hurricane, another reason I like the Devils at this price is that this will be the Hurricanes only their second game, right? The season started a week ago. By the time you're listening to this, the Devils for the Devils, it started even before that in Czechia. They've certainly put a lot of miles on their traveling from to and from Europe, and then now they're going on this back-to-back. But the game today started at 1. I'm not too worried about it. They look good again. So I think this number should be a little bit tighter, considering that I expect the Devils to be perhaps even right now, just like a bit of a better team than Carolina. So I like New Jersey here as an underdog on the road to take advantage of a interesting schedule spot, I guess we can call it, for Carolina.
Yeah, I actually don't love the spot, like Carolina coming off that loss versus Tampa, but I think the argument just from a more like standard power ranking perspective, it does seem like a fairly long number on the Devils, who everyone's kind of counting on to be a better team than Carolina this year. I am, at least. They're still out there, or prior to today's game, they're out there at 11-1 to win the President's Trophy, the Devils. I still like that as a bet. I think this team, I like them in the President specifically over the Western, or like over just East leading or East number 1 seed, because I actually view them as a deeper and better team than some of these top teams out West in terms of racking up regular season points. And I still think that, like you said, Seamus Casey looks really good. Kovacevic has been solid. Like, I think this team can withstand their share of injuries, which are inevitably going to come. And then, yeah, Jake Allen's been really good. I think he can put more points up as a backup. So to kind of keep beating that drum, I think the Devils are a good bet to win the President's Trophy.
Okay. So that's our best bets coming in on Minnesota and New Jersey, both on the road Tuesday night. Underdogs at the top of the show, Columbus Blue Jackets and Chicago Blackhawks. Anytime goal scorers, we like Dougie Hamilton and Andrei Svechnikov in the same game. That'll do it for this episode of Line Change. We'll be back again previewing Wednesday's games and then again Thursday's games later this week. Until then, best of luck with all your bets, and thank you to our producer Noah for all the hard work on the back end.